tried to shut them up.
There's no guarantee to free speech.
They tried to cancel them.
Deplatforming works.
They even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro,
Steve Bannon,
now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
They call them rebels.
Basket of deplorables.
They call them rogues.
They claim to guns or religion.
And they say they're outlaws.
These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
War Room presents Rebels, Rogues, and Outlaws.
You set out to take Vienna! Take Vienna!
The national bestseller by longtime Bannon producer Dan Fluette. Take a journey through the pictorial history of War Room. In a culture that celebrates the weak, show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluette.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is king!
Making a good profit? Fair.
Look! There's something out there!
Don't be afraid. This was a miracle to some, but a threat to others.
Trust in God. Trust in me also.
Forgive them, Father. They know not what they do.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's special edition of Human Events Daily. Today is April 18th, 2025, Anno Domini. It is Good Friday, the most solemn day of the year. And it is the day that brings us towards Easter. And this Easter special today is going to be called War for Heaven, the King versus the Damned. You see, Christ's resurrection on Easter is not just a celebration. It's about picking a side in the battle for the soul of the world. Think about it. 2,000 years ago, a king walked among us, not a politician, not a warlord, but the Son of God. He didn't come with a sword or a manifesto. He came with the truth, the raw, unfiltered, eternal, divine truth. And what did the world do? The elites, the bureaucrats, the mob of his time, they spit in his face. They crowned him with thorns and they nailed him to a cross, and they thought they'd won. Satan thought that he'd won. They thought they'd buried the light. But Christ himself, on the third day, rolled back the stone of the tomb. The king rose and the gates of hell trembled after Christ stormed through them on Holy Saturday. That's the story they don't want you to hear. I'm not talking about pastel eggs or bunny rabbits. That's the watered down version they feed you to keep you docile. The real Easter is a rebellion, the ultimate red pill. It's Christ kicking over the tables of the money changers, staring down the Pharisees, breaking the chains of death himself. And we're going to talk about Holy Saturday because not a lot of people talk about the harrowing of hell. This is a reminder that no empire, no ideology, no lie, no demon, not even Satan himself can stand against the King of Kings. But look around. The damned, they're restless, and they're not hiding anymore. They're in the streets. They're in the boardrooms. They're in the algorithms. They're the ones telling you that the truth is relative, that good is evil. The cross is just a symbol. Yeah, they're building their own kingdom, a godless, soulless machine where you're nothing but a cog. They want you to kneel as well, but not to the Savior, to their dogma. Cancel culture, woke ideology. This isn't new stuff. This is the same old serpent whispering, did God really say that? No, this is a spiritual war, not just for heaven, but for earth, for your family, for your freedoms, for your soul. And the damned think that they've got the upper hand. They've got the megaphones, the platforms, the power, but they forgot one thing. The king already won. Easter isn't just a memory. It's a promise. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. So today we're going to ask, whose side are you on? The king's or the damned? You can't sit this one out. Neutrality is surrender. The war is raging, and it's not just spiritual, it's cultural. Yes, it is political, but it's personal. They call you names. They'll try to silence you. They'll try to mock your faith. But let me tell you something. Every time they stand, every time they push, you push back. Every time they lie, you speak the truth. Every time they try to bury the truth, you dig it up, because the king didn't stay in the grave, and neither will we. This Easter, don't just celebrate. Fight. Fight for the cross, for the empty tomb, for the world he died to save. The king is risen, and the damned are on notice. Choose your side. Arm yourself with the truth and the sword of St. Michael, and let's take back the heavens. Let's take back the earth. One soul, one battle, one victory at a time, for he is risen.
Understand what America First truly means.
Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
All right, Jack Posobiec, Human Events Daily. This is our Easter special, The War for Heaven, the King versus the Damned. I want to bring in Real America's Voice and also welcome the Salem Radio Network with Hour 3 of the Charlie Kirk Show. Folks, think about it. Every dollar you spend is either supporting your values or working against them. In today's economy, where you spend your money matters. And that's how we take back our country. Patriot Mobile is leading the way as America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. Switch today without sacrificing quality or service. You'll get exceptional nationwide coverage because unlike most budget wireless providers, Patriot Mobile has access to all three major U.S. networks. You can even add two numbers onto networks on one phone, something the big guys can't even do. Stay connected with flexible, unlimited data plans to fit your lifestyle. These plans offer high-speed data, mobile hotspots, international roaming, device protection, and even internet backup. Here's the best part. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're supporting faith, family, and freedom. If you believe in our First and Second Amendment rights, the sanctity of life, and support our veterans, this is where you belong. Switching is simple. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade. Patriot Mobile's 100% U.S.-based team will get you activated in just minutes. Right now, go to patriotmobile.com/POSO or call 972-PATRIOT to get a free month of service with promo code POSO. Make the switch. Defend freedom with every call and text. That's patriotmobile.com/POSO or call 972-PATRIOT. All right, now, and on this Easter special, I wanted to bring on writing co-pilot today is going to be Joshua Lysek, the co-author of Unhumans, The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them, and Bulletproof, the truth about the assassination attempts on President Trump. Joshua, how are you? Happy Easter, man.
Happy Easter to you, Jack. Thanks for having me on.
So one interesting thing that I've noticed about Unhumans is that people are starting to refer to it more and more as a Christian book, which is interesting because we didn't really write it to be a religious book in any way, but it does kind of work out that so many of the victims of communism did tend to be Christians. And that was something that came up in the research again and again, whether it be France, whether it be Russia, or whether it be Spain. And of course, what we see going on today, this is something where when we did the Tucker Carlson interview, even he asked, he said, is there a demonic aspect to all of this? And I said, well, you know, Tucker, we weren't writing a spiritual book, but personally, yes, that's exactly what I believe. I do believe this is demonic influence that pushes people to these horrific evils in society. And one of the things that I always like to talk about on the program, and I wanted to get into in this special, is people talk about Jesus spending the 3 days that he was dead. And they say, well, he was in the tomb, and they say that he was there. But the modern church has kind of gotten away from the teaching of the harrowing of hell. And this is the idea of what happened on Holy Saturday. What happened in between the tomb being shut and the stone being rolled forth. And this is something Mel Gibson was talking about this on Rogan recently, how the Passion of the Christ 2 is going to go into this ancient Christian, which was a widespread belief at the time, of the harrowing of hell, something the early church talked about. It's in the Apostles' Creed, which dates back to the 4th century. It goes back even further. St. Ignatius was talking about this in 100 AD. Of course, it's referenced in the Bible itself, in Ephesians and in Peter again and again, about Christ leading a host out of captivity, and Christ preaching to those in prison. And yet it's interesting. So Joshua, we were chatting last night, and even you mentioned that this was something that, as you were growing up, that you'd never really heard about.
Yes, that's right. I grew up in a number of evangelical Christian conservative communities, and while they certainly have their upsides, like the memorization of the epistles, memorization of the Gospels, and being able to recite this or that Bible verse for everything, one of the things that was lacking is an investigation of these most ancient teachings and stories from the Bible, the Bible itself. And of course, one of those is the harrowing of hell. Now, if we look at what the word harrowing means, it comes from an Old English word that means to pillage or to plunder. And we go, what? Pillage or plunder? And then if we look at what we consider to be non-Christian, just think about that for a second. The most ancient Catholic teachings we considered to be non-Christian. These are the spiritual grandchildren of the apostles, and we totally and completely ignored them because they had the word saint in front of their name. This is, I think, a bizarre experience that probably tens of millions of people in America can relate to. But when we go back and look at these traditions, we see that the story is that on Holy Saturday, while Jesus was dead, he visited the underworld, in Greek Hades, in Hebrew Sheol, and that is where the righteous and the unrighteous were together in the underworld. And he pillaged and plundered this level of hell, meaning he preached the gospel, which is in 1 Peter, by the way. He preached the gospel, declared his victory over Satan, over evil, over death itself, and he brought the righteous with him. Now, that, of course, is what the plundering is. It's a removal of the righteous souls during this judgment period. And the story goes, if we look at the oldest sources of this story, the first two souls he liberated were Adam and Eve.
That's right. By the way, you'll find that motif particularly common in the Eastern Church. So people know my wife, Tanya Tay, is Orthodox. And funny enough, Orthodox Easter and Western Easter are actually on the same time frame. For once, it actually lines up this year. So I think it's incredible. Where I always joke that within our marriage, we're mending the schism. And this year, of course, the Easter and Pascha have aligned. And I think this is absolutely perfect. And I've also called, by the way, on all the Ortho Bros to join in. We're doing a 3-day fast. So I'm on like day 2 of the 3-day fast, 72 hours. Just as Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days, we are fasting for 3 days from Holy Thursday until, of course, our Easter meal. But it really is something. And people go, I'll go to Ephesians for people who are saying, what is this? I didn't hear about this. And by the way, just to, when you go to the Orthodox churches, you'll see the icons of Christ breaking the gates of hell and then bringing Adam and Eve out of their tombs. And then, sometimes you'll also see a procession up into heaven. You see this in a lot of Byzantine artwork. You'll see it in Eastern churches. You walk into any Orthodox church, you'll probably find one anywhere in the United States, or certainly in the cathedrals. And so the Western Christian audience, it's like, wait, what is that one? I don't recognize that one. Well, here it is in Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 8 to 10. When he ascended on high, he led a host of captives. He who is descended is the one who also ascended far above all the heavens. Matthew 12:40. For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of earth. And there's quotations from St. Augustine. He descended into hell, broke the gates of darkness, brought forth the souls of the righteous who were held in the bonds of death. St. Ignatius. How shall we be able to live apart from him, seeing that the prophets, being his disciples in the Spirit, were expecting him as their teacher, and for this he whom they rightly awaited when he came raised them from the dead. So there's this. It also kind of serves a logical, I think. It serves a logical work as well, because what to make of all of the righteous? Where are Moses, Elijah, the prophets, Isaiah? Were they in hell because they hadn't gone to heaven yet? Where were Adam and Eve this whole time? Well, Saint Thomas Aquinas tells us that this area of Sheol or Hades was referred to as limbo. So we're breaking down the truth of Christ's descent into hell, the war for heaven, the king versus the damned. On this Easter special, Human Events Daily. Jack Posobiec, Joshua Lysek will be right back.
Evans here with your Real America's Voice news break. Thanks so much for being along for the ride. President Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff is headed to Rome for continued talks with Iran tomorrow. But first, he met with two top Israeli officials today in Paris amid reported concerns from Israel that any nuclear agreement reached with the Iranians will be similar to the one signed under the Obama administration in 2015, which President Trump eventually abandoned. In the meantime, the U.S. continues sending messages to Iran through attacks on its proxies. This is video from American airstrikes on Yemeni oil port, or a Yemeni oil port that was held by Houthi rebels. At least 74 people are killed, 171 hurt. It's said to be the deadliest attack under President Trump's second term. In a brief statement following the attack, U.S. Central Command says, and I'm quoting here, U.S. forces took action to eliminate this source of fuel for the Iran-backed Houthi terrorists and deprive them of illegal revenue that has funded Houthi efforts to terrorize the entire region for over 10 years. The 26-year-old charged in the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson is one big step closer to being put to death if he is convicted of the crime. A hearing is scheduled for today as the suspect's lawyers are expected to ask a judge to prevent federal prosecutors from seeking the death penalty. On Thursday, a federal grand jury indicted the accused killer, which sets the stage for federal prosecutors to pursue a death penalty case. The indictment means the federal grand jury found probable cause to charge the 26-year-old with murder, stalking, and firearms offenses. If convicted of those charges in the federal case, the jury would actually then be called on in a separate case to recommend the death penalty. The verdict would have to be unanimous, and the judge would be required to impose it. Now, all of what I just mentioned only applies to the federal case. There's also a separate state case against the accused murderer that will be decided on its own. That's a quick check of your headlines. As always, we appreciate having you along for the ride. Now, let's get you back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Today, they talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, he's done a great job.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we are back. This is Human Events Daily, our Easter special. We're discussing all things Easter, specifically, by the way, for Holy Week, Holy Saturday, which is a day that, look, everyone remembers Good Friday. Everyone remembers Easter Sunday, but somewhere along the way, it seems as though we've lost our connection to Holy Saturday and the importance that this plays in the Passion of the Christ, because people think that the Passion of the Christ ends with Christ's death. Not so. There was actually a mission, believe it or not, to the gates of Hades itself, where Christ descended low to bring forward the souls that were left in limbo, and also for what's called the harrowing of hell, where he tormented the devil, tormented the demons. And we're speaking with author Joshua Lysek. Joshua, there's a line in Aquinas where is in the Summa Theologica, where he's discussing this 800 years ago, and he says that this would have been a cosmic event because Christ's light was able to, the light of Christ's soul itself, the King's presence actually coming down into Hades, into the land of the dead, the underworld, would have illuminated every single dark corner all the way into the lowest depth of hell itself, because the demons, Satan himself, Lucifer, would of course all be required to obey direct commands from the king. He is, of course, the king of the demons as well, despite their constant attempts to disobey and wage war on the throne. They simply are required to. So for me, Holy Saturday, I think one of its most important keys here is that when we have Christ at our back, that he actually does have power over the demons and over even death itself. And I feel like a lot of that gets lost when we don't talk about Holy Saturday.
Yes, that's right. And it is a continual inversion of what we like to think of in terms of a hierarchy. And this is one of the most profound aspects of the story of Jesus Christ as the King of Kings, is that when we think of a king in a traditional sense, it's the top dog, it's the chief, it's the leader, it's the boss of all the bosses. It's the person who thumbs up or thumbs down like a Roman emperor can decide the fate and can take great pleasure from immense suffering. This is sort of traditional king sort of a character, a humility-free zone. But when we look at Jesus Christ, we have his willing execution like a common criminal, like a non-citizen. We have the crown of thorns. We have the inversion of what pillaging means. To take and to steal, it is rather a restoration, or it's a returning. So many of the events that happen during Holy Week and then leading up to the crucifixion and the resurrection, so on and so forth, is Jesus doing the opposite of what a king is supposed to do. It is a king being, instead of the chief, it is Jesus Christ, the King of Kings, being the chief servant to his followers and to his apostles. And this is why I believe the image of the crucifix in the Catholic tradition and the icons of the Eastern Orthodox tradition are so essential. And I grieve for all of the Protestants and all the evangelicals across this country and across the world who, in their worship and in their daily meditations and practices, simply have the image of, let's say, a plain and generic cross symbol versus that which is the crucifix, which is the image of the King of Kings willingly humbling himself to the most radical extent that the highest could possibly do, which is becoming the lowest, and then going even lower than death into the underworld itself as this king of these, king of the damned in a way, and bringing those souls with him, pillaging out of that place those who are righteous, those who lived a righteous life. And this, let's say, underworld theology answers so many questions and closes so many loops that children have. Like, well, what about righteous people who died before, like Jesus came? What about that?
Exactly. When I was a kid, I was talking about this with producer Faz, leading up to this. He said, that's a question that I thought about when I was a kid. It's a question that I personally thought about. What happened to them? Where were they? Were they just in some cosmic, waiting room? And kind of, yeah, actually. So these are questions, by the way, that go back to the earliest days of the church. And Aquinas was extrapolating on this 800 years, 8 centuries ago. He wrote this out. But because we've been so disconnected from Christian history, it's something that even good teachers today, good Sunday school teachers, they're not bringing this up. But this belief was understood and widespread in the early church. And that's why I think it's so important. Do what we can to bring back the early church history on this Holy Week. We'll be right back. Human Events Daily, Jack Posobiec and author Joshua Lysak.
this Real America's Voice News Break. I'm Terrence Bates. President Trump says he is, quote, in no rush to make a deal over his trade tariffs. However, he and his team are continuing to meet with countries who are eager to nullify the Trump reciprocal tariffs. On Thursday, it was Italy's Giorgia Meloni who was at the White House meeting with the president and representing the interests of Italy as well as the European Union.
We have a lot of countries that want to make a deal. Frankly, they want to make deals more than I do. Go ahead, Scott. Would you say something?
Yeah, we've got a process in place. We're working on the big 15 economies. We had a fantastic meeting with Japan yesterday. I believe it's been called with the EU already. And then we have South Korea coming in next week. And I believe India is also talking. That's moving very quickly.
As President Trump works to reset the global economic order, he's also considering a reset at the Federal Reserve. The commander-in-chief says Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell's termination, quote, cannot come fast enough. That statement coming amid the president's continued frustration over the central bank not cutting interest rates aggressively enough, especially after the European Central Bank cut interest rates for a seventh time Thursday. Those cuts are said to be focused on countering concerns about economic growth brought on by President Trump's tariffs.
I don't think he's doing the job. He's too late, always too late, a little slow, and I'm not happy with him. I let him know it, and if I want him out, he'll be out of there real fast, believe me.
The administration is, as I mentioned in my remarks, is implementing significant policy changes, and particularly trade now is the focus. And the effects of that are likely to move us away from our goals. So unemployment is likely to go up as the economy slows in all likelihood, and inflation is likely to go up as tariffs find their way, and some part of those tariffs come to be paid by the public.
No matter the economic policies coming out of the White House, Powell says the central bank will continue working towards a 2% goal for inflation.
And Jack, where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, folks, we're back. Jack Posobiec, Joshua Lysek, author. We're talking about the war for heaven, the king versus the damned on this Easter special of Human Events Daily. But folks, listen up, because if you're still drinking, that corporate watered down nonsense that they call coffee, it's time for a serious wake up call. Talking about blackout coffee. This isn't just coffee. It's a statement and a declaration that you're done with weak beans and weak values. This is high octane American roasted fuel for those who grind harder, stand taller, and never back down. Look, I love this stuff. It's been getting me through. I gave up energy drinks for Easter, so I've definitely been leaning on my blackout coffee. Blackout Coffee isn't playing games. They're cranking out more bags than ever, shipping faster than ever, and keeping you locked in with coffee that actually fires you up. Whether you're chasing big goals, crushing the daily grind, or just refusing to drink coffee made by people who hate you, Blackout Coffee has your back. So stop settling. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/Poso and use promo code Poso for 20% off your first order. Drink like a patriot. Drink Blackout. That's blackoutcoffee.com/Poso. Stop waiting. Let's go. All right, we're on with Joshua Lysek. We are talking about this war for heaven, this idea that we are locked in, and as C.S. Lewis talks about the spiritual war in the Screw Tape Letters, it's demons, temptations, sin, and we see so much of it lately when we see rank criminality defended at the highest levels. CNN running puff pieces on Luigi Maggioni, and an accused assassin on video. Carmelo Anthony, and the response to that, the stabbing of a young boy at a track meet. Illegal aliens and criminals, MS-13 members, are suddenly treated as if they're kissed by an angel, and we're supposed to go and help them, as opposed to the victims of these gangs who don't get any mention whatsoever. So I wanted to bring Joshua Lysek back because, Joshua, we mentioned before when we wrote the book Unhumans and we did our exhaustive examination of communism, we really found that when communists take power, they tend to target one group above all others and one group first. Can you tell us who that group is and maybe your analysis on why?
Yes, Jack. And that group that the Unhumans always target first and foremost is Christians. In Spain, in China, Russia, everywhere that the left, the far left particularly, takes power or infiltrates and then takes over, that's who they target first. And one of the reasons that we believe why, of course, is because of the anti-Christian influence. What we discussed with Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, and others is, of course, the demonic influence, the hate of perfect love. And perfect love casts out what the Bible says? Casts out fear. And what we observe from the far left, the radical left, is using fear as a weapon. And so one of the reasons why literal murderers, domestic violence committers, those who enjoy causing suffering, those are the heroes of the far left, and now it's even the mainstream left. At this point, Luigi Mangione has received something like 60,000 love letters and fan mail and whatnot. And when we observe why this is the case, the enemy, as Jesus said, comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. And we use that exact line in Unhumans to describe the agenda of the radical left. And what we observe, of course, is that the left as a group allows their radical far left fringe to set the agenda. On the right, we cast out the fringe element, but on the left, they take their fringe and grant them absolute power to engage in whatever they want to engage in. And so those who terrorize, those who cause fear, those who keep kids from being able to go safely out riding their bikes, those who keep moms of young children from wanting to go out to the local playground for fear that they're going to find a Carmelo Anthony with a knife lurking about, Luigi Mangione prowling about for their husband who's a successful business owner, entrepreneur, or CEO. They thrive on fear. It is the exact opposite of love. And we point this out in Unhumans that if they can cause us to feel fear, then what happens afterwards is they win. And of course, we saw this during the COVID-19 pandemic, is the use of fear as a weapon to squash dissent and to keep hidden minority reports. And this is how free speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, they die because, well, I don't want to speak up. Look at what they're doing to people like me. I better just keep my mouth shut, keep my head down. And this, of course, is Alexander Solzhenitsyn writing about the Bolshevik Revolution of October 1917. He pointed out that this is how the secret police going door to door were able to keep an entire population of that time, the Russian Empire, but Moscow and other places specifically, how they were able to keep a mass population effectively in a giant open-air prison with just a few guards, the radical Bolshevik troublemakers who were going door to door, like I said, this is secret police, is because the people were afraid that they would hear a knock on their door.
And of course, this is a system that we refer to as anarcho-tyranny. And it almost sounds like a misnomer. How could something be anarchism and tyranny at the same time? Well, the anarchism is the fear being turned up. That's the violent criminals being let out of jail. And people will say, Jack, why do you and Joshua talk about these, 100-year-old revolutions and 200 years old, French Revolution and stuff even before that? And I say, because it's exactly what we see going on today, every single day. When you see, just this week, right, Democrat politicians flew all the way to El Salvador to demand the release of an MS-13 international narco-terror gang member, and yet will not spend 1 minute discussing the actual victims of that gang. And it's very clear. They flipped this over. The anarchy is the point. The fear is the point. They will be let out into the populace. Why? To keep you docile. And they will turn around, by the way, and say, if you have a problem with it, you're a racist, or you're a bigot, or you're hateful. Meanwhile, they're able to use that to do what? to install their tyranny. And we saw this, of course, with COVID. Remember, if you went outside your house, you're going to kill grandma. You're going to kill everyone at the school. You're going to kill nurses. You're going to kill doctors. If you go out of house, or if that mask comes down below your nose while you're eating on an airplane, you're going to kill everyone on this plane. If you do that, we all remember what it was like. It was done. They use fear to install tyranny. One other piece, by the way, that I would just add to your fantastic description there was that they actually turn the populace against one another. Why? Because they offer you little bits of power. They offer you little bits of tyranny that you can use yourself. Well, let us know. Let us know if you hear anything. Let us know what's going on around the village. Let us know who's talking out of turn, who's saying things that shouldn't be done. And we all remember this during COVID. It's a perfect example. Let us know who's not wearing their mask. Let us know who's not being socially distant. And you saw how it activated in our own society, right? America, we're so advanced and we're so progressive and we're so developed, and we all did it too. Why? Because human nature is immutable. And that is what you learn from reading the Bible. It's certainly what I always reflected on reading the Bible. In addition to the theology, I said, man, the same stuff that people were dealing with back then is the exact same way that people are now. 2,000 years later, it has not changed one iota. Human nature doesn't change. Actually, Joshua, you have a great tweet about human nature, do you not?
Yes, I do. One of them, of course, is bad reviews from bad people are good reviews. And this, of course, is based on the scripture. My paraphrase of it is, woe to you if all men speak well of you. And so if the secret police are gossiping and saying awful things about you, those are in fact good reviews. That is what you ought to strive for and aim for. And this, of course, is why we are proud, for example, that Unhumans has been totally and completely condemned by the literal Communist Party USA. And the tweet of yours I was thinking of as well was when you said that this is sort of the difference between conservatives and liberals, where conservatives will say, wow, human nature tends towards a very, very Hobbesian outlook. And I'm trying to paraphrase it, but, human nature leads people to sin. We should do something about this. And liberals say, people shouldn't sin. There shouldn't be sin. It's like, no, we agree, but, we know that this will happen, so we should probably set up our society in such a way to deal with that. Liberals, there shouldn't be sin. It's just over and over because they believe in this sort of utopian version of society and humanity, which is itself, by the way, a form of fear. It's a form of fear of acknowledging that there is a flaw. And this, by the way, if you're a believer, you acknowledge this. We are all sinners. We are all the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve, as C.S. Lewis writes, that we are all imbued with that original sin, and this is man's fallen nature. And of course, the overcoming of sin is the entire point of the experiment therein. But of course, this is also what the demonic play on. Yes, exactly. And if you talk to anyone that I like to refer to as NPR Americans, these are people who consume the news sources, the official sources, and believe it's real news. So like they listen to NPR and then they read the New York Times and they're informed about what's going on in the world. Well, if you talk to them, you understand that they don't believe in good versus evil, capital G, capital E. They believe everybody's basically good, everyone's just trying really hard, but there are these mean people who put up fences and create boundaries and make rules and laws, and they're straight white Christians, and they're mean, and they're racist, and probably misogynistic and bigoted as well. It's the oppressor versus oppressed frame we write about. And if you actually talk to NPR Americans about MS-13 and the brutal torture that they commit upon others, particularly upon women and children, they will look at you with glazed eyes. They'll give you the SSR eyes, as I like to say, and they will say, well, it's just so sad that the person joined that gang and felt like they had to do that. They must be really oppressed by straight white Christians. They must be really oppressed by the result of globalist, imperialist American policy under Republican presidents. It's just not fair. So we need to let them into our country. We need to give them citizenship, voting rights, and health care, car, and a house to make it fair. And fairness, guess what? There's only one place where fairness exists, and that's at the gate of heaven.
itself. We'll be right back. Jack Posobiec and Joshua Lysak, the author, discussing the war for heaven on Human Events Daily, our Easter special, Real America's Voice and Salem Radio Network.
Excuse me for just a minute.
King Arthur!
Get down from there!
1, 2, 3!
You are not King Arthur!
Charles, you're going to tell him a great story about forgiveness.
Can we do this without the cat? Our story begins 2,000 years ago when baby Jesus came into the world.
Wait, stop. If it's not about a king, then I'm not interested.
This story is about the King of Kings. It is a great story.
When
when I'm working long hours. I'm always listening to Human Events.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we are back. Easter special here on Human Events Daily, the war for heaven, the king versus the damned. And by the way, this is something I know we've been talking about a lot of serious, some dark topics here. And it's true. When we talk about the demonic, when we talk about Satan, when we talk about evil, when we talk about sin and temptation, these are serious subjects and they do get dark. But here's something else that we can talk about is the light, because I love to see this. Did you know that Christianity is becoming one of the most popular movements in America today? Polls are coming out now showing that Gen Z are even more Christian than the millennials that preceded them. They are flooding and flocking back to the church, and Christians are becoming finally more active. Christianity is becoming more publicly celebrated. And what better way, by the way, to get into the Easter season than the movie King of Kings that has just been released and is out now, breaking box office records at your local movie theater. And we've got a great deal for you from Angel Studios, the producers of King of Kings. This great it's a children's movie, a retelling of the Passion of the Christ through the lens of Charles Dickens, explaining it to his son. So how do you get this offer? You go to angel.com and then join the Angel Guild. And guess what? You can get 2 free tickets to King of Kings. Or while you're there, if you're interested, you can also pay it forward and donate tickets to King of Kings for other people, if you so choose, who want to go and see the film. This is great. I think it's fantastic. And I think it's absolutely endemic of where our society is. Remember, Snow White went down in a massive global disaster. This degradation of our society, this degradation of our cultural heritage. It was cultural vandalism, what they did to Snow White. But what Angel Studios is doing with King of Kings is cultural honor, honoring our cultural traditions and taking back that cultural hegemony from the left. Joshua Lysek, talk to me a little bit about what it means. Is Christianity back?
Yes, sin became so cringe. We had this army of millions of Baron Karens with gay pride pins on and 1,001 bumper stickers on their Subarus, and it's just not cool. And we look at what they do. Well, they're atheists, or they're agnostic, or they like to talk about being ex-evangelicals is another thing that's being used, and it's not cool. What's cool is what's beautiful. What's cool is traditional. What's cool to the young kings and queens these days is what is based. That is that which is Lindy, meaning it is timeless. It is offensive to these Karen characters, the millennials with the SSR eyes popping out at you from the Elon Musk is running a coup protests all over town. And we want the opposite of that. And as a result, we are seeing there was a statistic that was shared by the Barna Group when I was younger, and it was a sort of a wake-up call to the American church. And it was that 80% of millennials were leaving their Christian faith. 80%. This is about 15, almost 20 years ago that this was a statistic. And what has happened now is there are so many more people becoming Christian who are joining the church. So many more that now the numbers are break even. Christianity had been shrinking, but now there's so many more people who are coming into the faith that it's now break even. And of course, I expect to see more and more as Gen Z grows up and we have Gen Alpha, my children's generation, coming up. And when we see the type of Christianities that are attracting attention, it's the Catholic, it is the Orthodox. When I go to the Mass over at St. Bridget, it seems like either everybody is a grandmother or a great-grandparent age, or they're under 30, under 35. When we look at the women who are wearing the veils, it's women over 70 and women under 30, women under 25. It's a sort of skipping the generation of millennials who are all caught up in the new atheist movement that eventually kind of transformed into being an anti-Trump movement. And we look at it that it's not cool.
It's the TLM, what we call in the Catholic Church, the traditional Latin Mass. And you go to one, and there's so few of them, and people are spilling out of the pews. It's standing room only, babies crying in the back. It's fantastic. Joshua, we're just out of time. Where can people go to follow you, brother?
I'm on X and YouTube elsewhere at Joshua Lysak and at lysakghostwriting.com.
Go and follow Joshua Lysak. And to Joshua and everybody else out there, happy Easter. He is risen. Alleluia. He is risen. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.